A body discovered in flames, charred beyond recognition. No name, no past, no trace of who she had been. Her face destroyed, her ears gone, her fingers and toes cut away. Every detail of her identity stripped from her. Someone had tried to erase her from existence. But in the world of forensic science, the body always speaks. Every wound is a clue. Every scar tells a story. And in this case, the remains of a young woman would become the only key to unlocking the truth and exposing a killer. If you're a fan of true crime and criminal investigations, you won't want to miss our new book, The Ultimate Book of Serial Killers: 180 Files of the World's Most Notorious Murderers, now available on Amazon. You can also purchase the PDF version directly from our website for instant download. You'll find the link in the video description and in a pinned comment. Now, let's dive into today's case. Stonington, Connecticut, is the kind of town that feels frozen in time. Rolling hills stretch into the distance, forests line the roads, and small hamlets dot the countryside. The nights are especially dark, with long, winding roads cutting through isolated patches of farmland and woods. It was on one of these roads that something strange caught the attention of a passerby one evening. In the distance, flames licked the night sky. At first glance, it looked like a brush fire. The driver pulled over and called 911 just as a local fire chief happened to arrive. Together, they rushed to contain the blaze. But as the chief trained his extinguisher on the fire, he realized with horror what he was actually looking at: a human body. He immediately shifted his aim, angling the spray so the chemicals would fall gently, suppressing the flames without destroying critical evidence. The site was quickly sealed off. Connecticut state troopers closed the road, searching for clues around the scorched remains. Documentation was key. Every angle, every object, every detail had to be preserved. The body had been wrapped in layers of plastic, blankets, and duct tape. This was clearly not the place where the victim had died. It was a dump site. Whoever had done this wanted her to disappear, to be unrecognizable. The state medical examiner was called in. He was a seasoned forensic pathologist with decades of experience and thousands of autopsies behind him, took the lead. He knew this case would test every skill he had. The body was transported, still encased in its wrappings. Each layer was carefully removed, one at a time, to protect any trace evidence. It was a gruesome discovery. The victim was a young woman, possibly in her 20s. Her features had been destroyed. Parts of her body were deliberately cut away. To the investigators, the message was clear. Someone had gone to extreme lengths to hide who she was. Without fingers, prints were useless. Without toes, even the smallest identifying details, like a ring or tattoo, would be erased. Yet, despite the brutality, there were still clues. The burns told a story. Her front had been scorched more severely than her back, suggesting she had been lying face up when the fire was started. The ground had shielded her lower back, preserving patches of skin. And in one area, the skin had not been burned away. It had been deliberately cut. Detectives immediately suspected a tattoo had been there. Tattoos are deeply personal markers of identity, and removing one suggested the killer knew investigators would use it to connect the victim to a name. Police searched missing persons databases across Connecticut for any young woman who might have matched the profile. Nothing. But when they expanded the search further, a lead finally emerged on Long Island, New York, just 80 miles away. The missing woman's name was Rebecca Coster. Rebecca Coster was only 24 years old. She lived on Long Island with her parents and worked as a nursing assistant, caring for developmentally disabled adults. Her father, Larry Ross, filed the missing persons report after her employer called to say she hadn't shown up for work, a move that was completely unlike her. Rebecca had gone out with friends the night before, and by the early hours of the morning, around 3:30 a.m., she seemed fine. But after that, she vanished. Flyers were printed with her photo, height, weight, hair color, and one very distinctive identifying feature: a large butterfly tattoo on her lower back. When Connecticut detectives learned about her case, they noted the similarities, but at first they were hesitant. Long Island was nearly 80 miles away. Could the body found burning on the roadside really belong to this young woman? During the autopsy, the doctor discovered the killer's mistake. While much of Rebecca's body had been mutilated to hide her identity, her teeth were still intact. Dental records, unlike fingerprints, cannot burn away so easily. They provide an ironclad method of identification. With the help of Long Island police, Rebecca's dental records were obtained and compared. The match was undeniable. The Jane Doe in Connecticut was officially identified as Rebecca Coster. The next step was the hardest. Detectives now had to deliver the news no parent ever wants to hear. They arrived at the Coster home, where Rebecca's parents were waiting. The words fell like a weight. Rebecca had been murdered. Her mother described running outside, screaming into the night, unable to comprehend that someone had killed her daughter. For investigators, the case was now urgent. Who could have taken the life of such a vibrant young woman, and why? They began the process of piecing together her final hours, starting with her family and closest friends. Rebecca was described as bubbly and full of life. She had a close bond with her mother, even following in her footsteps by becoming a nursing assistant. On the night she disappeared, her mother Barbara was working the overnight shift. She last saw her daughter playfully teasing her brother for French fries before heading out with her best friend Nicole and her new boyfriend Dan. It wasn't a long or serious relationship with Dan. They had only just begun dating, but as with any missing person case, detectives had to look closely at the people closest to the victim. Nicole told Rebecca's mother she had left the group earlier, leaving Rebecca behind with Dan and a few other friends. Dan was quickly brought in for questioning. He told detectives that he had personally walked Rebecca to her door at 3:30 in the morning and that she went inside safely. According to him, that was the last time he saw her. He insisted he cared for Rebecca and would never hurt her. To test his credibility, investigators suggested a polygraph. Dan agreed. The questions focused on whether he knew what happened to Rebecca or where she might be. When the results came back, they indicated he was being deceptive. But detectives weren't entirely convinced. Polygraphs are not foolproof, and while the results were troubling, Dan continued to cooperate fully. His house was searched top to bottom, and nothing linked him to Rebecca's disappearance or death. For now, suspicion remained, but no clear evidence pointed to Dan. Investigators worked to verify every account from that night. One by one, they compared statements from Dan and the friends who had been out with Rebecca. Every version of events lined up perfectly. No discrepancies, no obvious lies. With no hard evidence linking Dan to the crime, detectives were forced to widen their search. They turned again to the medical examiner, hoping the autopsy could narrow the window of time when Rebecca had been killed. The doctor examined toxicology samples for alcohol and drugs. Both came back negative. That meant Rebecca had metabolized any alcohol she might have consumed at the bar before she died. In other words, she had been alive for a period of time after leaving the bar. He estimated the time of death at roughly 4 hours after she was last seen at 3:30 a.m. But even he admitted it was only an approximation. Time of death is an inexact science, influenced by countless factors. Still, the estimate gave detectives a critical lead. If Rebecca was alive after leaving Dan, who had she been with? Her family accessed her phone records online. 2 calls stood out, both from the same unfamiliar number beginning with 617. One at 4:10 a.m. lasted 15 minutes. Another at 4:27 a.m. lasted only 20 seconds. The timing was chilling. Whoever was on the other end was likely the last person to speak to Rebecca. To her mother, it was heartbreaking. Rebecca had always believed she was safe, that no one would ever harm her, but as her mother later reflected, there are predators who wear human faces. Detectives raced to trace the mysterious number. In the modern world, every cell phone leaves a footprint. Calls bounce from tower to tower, and with those records, investigators can triangulate a phone's location. They discovered the phone in question was moving west to east that morning, heading straight toward Rebecca's home. The first call, at 4:10, was long. The second, at 4:27, was short, as if signaling an arrival. Investigators believe the caller was outside her home when that last call was placed. But there was a problem. The 617 number wasn't in any database. It wasn't registered to a name. It was a prepaid burner phone, a dead end. While detectives chased the elusive caller, the medical examiner continued his examination. One critical question remained. Was Rebecca alive when she was set on fire? He looked for soot in her lungs. If she had inhaled smoke, it meant she was breathing during the fire. There was none. She had died before the flames. The burns also obscured surface wounds, forcing the doctor to search deeper. He examined every organ. Inside the abdominal cavity, he found a stab wound to the liver and a large volume of clotted blood. That injury alone could be fatal. But there was more. Rebecca had 4 sharp force wounds to her neck. Because of the burns, it was difficult to determine whether they occurred before or after death. The doctor suspected at least one neck wound had been inflicted while she was alive. He knew that a cut vein can draw air into the circulatory system, causing what's known as an air embolism, a rush of air to the heart that stops it almost instantly. To confirm, he took X-rays. They revealed a telltale air blood level in the heart. It was the proof he needed. Rebecca had been stabbed in the neck while still alive. The embolism had stopped her heart. Combined with the stab wound to the liver, these injuries left no doubt. She had been murdered by multiple sharp force injuries before being burned. Armed with an official cause of death, homicide, detectives turned back to their timeline. They retraced Rebecca's final night, focusing on the bar, the last place she had been seen alive. There they discovered the next piece of the puzzle, a full surveillance system capturing the events of that night. The surveillance footage from the bar offered investigators their first real break. There was no question. Rebecca had been there. The cameras showed her sitting somewhat apart from her friends while her boyfriend and others mingled nearby. Then, a man appeared. He wasn't a typical 20-something out for a late night. He looked older, dressed in a conservative sweater vest, with nothing outwardly threatening about him. But his approach was swift, deliberate. He entered Rebecca's space and struck up a conversation. For several minutes, they sat side by side. Both could be seen on their phones. At one point, the man appeared to take Rebecca's phone in his hand, pressing in numbers as though entering his own contact details. Armed with this new lead, detectives went back to re-question Rebecca's friends. One of them, Jennifer, now recalled something that hadn't seemed important before. She remembered the man vividly, his persistence, his pushy demeanor, the way he made her uncomfortable. She described him as creepy with the questions he asked. Like with Rebecca, he had taken Jennifer's phone and entered his information himself, saving it under the name J. Brown. Computer crime specialists analyzed Jennifer's phone. There it was, J. Brown, listed with the same mysterious 617 number that had called Rebecca minutes before she vanished. For detectives, this was a breakthrough. Finally, they had a name, even if it was just an alias tied directly to both the bar encounter and Rebecca's final phone records. But before they could pursue J. Brown, another lead emerged. This one from the Connecticut Crime Lab. Investigators had submitted duct tape found wrapped around Rebecca's body. To their astonishment, latent print examiners managed to lift 2 thumbprints from the sticky side. This was extremely rare, especially given the fire damage. The prints were run against the state database. Within hours, there was a match. Both belonged to a man named Evans Ganthier. Now detectives had not one, but 2 suspects. On one hand was J. Brown, the man from the bar. On the other was Ganthier, whose fingerprints were literally on the tape binding Rebecca's body. But soon the connection became clear. J. Brown wasn't real. It was an alias, and behind it was Evans Ganthier. As they dug into his background, a disturbing picture emerged. While Ganthier didn't have a long list of violent felonies, there were troubling incidents. Domestic disputes with his girlfriend, allegations that he had been pimping her out, a pattern of photographing women inside his garage. Detectives showed Jennifer a photo array that included Ganthier's picture. Without hesitation, she pointed him out as the same man from the bar, the one who had inserted his number into her phone under the name J. Brown. It was the confirmation they needed. Now the focus shifted to tracking him down. Surveillance teams followed leads to the Bronx, where Ganthier's girlfriend lived. His SUV, a vehicle police knew he had been previously ticketed in, was spotted parked near her residence. The following day, investigators watched as Ganthier walked directly to the SUV. The moment he entered, a team of officers closed in. He was taken into custody without incident. At headquarters, detectives began their interrogation. Ganthier agreed to a search of his vehicle and his residence, insisting there was nothing to find. He denied any involvement in Rebecca's murder, but detectives weren't about to take his word for it. A thorough search was launched, one they hoped would reveal what really happened to Rebecca. When detectives searched Ganthier's garage, what they found immediately raised suspicion. There were cleaning supplies, rollers, brushes, a broom, cement cleaner, and fresh paint. The floor showed signs of being scrubbed and painted over, as though someone had tried to erase what had once been there. But there was nothing conclusive tying that garage to Rebecca. The real breakthrough came when investigators processed Ganthier's SUV. Red stains were discovered on the console and in the crevices near the driver's seat. Blood had pooled in the narrow space between the seat and console, an area that could only be reached if something had bled heavily inside the vehicle. DNA testing confirmed what detectives feared. It was Rebecca's blood. With that evidence in hand, investigators confronted Ganthier. Instead of confessing, he spun an elaborate tale. He admitted meeting Rebecca at the bar and calling her afterward, claiming she had willingly come with him. He said she suffered a sudden medical emergency, foamed at the mouth, and became unsteady. According to his version, she tripped over dumbbells in his garage, struck her head, and began bleeding. He insisted he panicked, put her in his SUV, and attempted to drive her to a hospital. By his account, she died on the way, leaving him in shock. From there, his story grew darker. He admitted to mutilating her body, cutting off her fingers and toes, carving away her tattoo, actions he said were meant to make her look like a missing person. He described wrapping her body, taking it across the Port Jefferson ferry to Connecticut, and setting it on fire after dousing it with gasoline. He acknowledged burning her remains but insisted he never killed her. According to him, Rebecca's death had been an accident. Detectives were unconvinced. The sheer brutality of the mutilation and burning went far beyond panic. As seasoned investigators knew, when killers are caught, they often attempt to minimize their actions. For Ganthier, claiming Rebecca had fallen was an attempt to recast murder as a tragic mishap. The case now rested on science. If Ganthier's story was to be refuted, the medical examiner's testimony would be critical. There was no evidence of skull fracture, no bleeding inside the brain, no trauma consistent with a fall. What he did find were stab wounds, one to the liver that caused extensive internal bleeding and multiple wounds to the neck. X-rays confirmed an air embolism in the heart, proving she was alive when at least one of those neck wounds was inflicted. These findings dismantled Ganthier's defense. Rebecca hadn't died from an accident, she had been murdered. Armed with this evidence, prosecutors charged him with second-degree murder. During the trial, Ganthier continued to deny responsibility, painting himself as a victim of circumstance. But the evidence told a different story. Blood in his car, fingerprints on the duct tape, and the autopsy results all pointed directly at him. His claim that Rebecca had never bled in the front seat was contradicted by the physical evidence. His story unraveled piece by piece. The trial dragged on for 4 weeks. Rebecca's mother attended every day, her grief visible but her determination unshaken. She had vowed to see justice served for her daughter. The jury deliberated for just 5.5 hours before returning their verdict: guilty of murder. The courtroom filled with a sense of relief. For the Coster family, it was not joy, but closure, an acknowledgement that Rebecca's life had value, and that the man responsible for destroying it would never walk free again. The judge sentenced Evans Ganthier to 25 years to life, condemning not only the murder, but the cruel and calculated attempts to erase Rebecca's identity. For investigators and prosecutors, the case was a testament to persistence and forensic science. Without fingerprints, DNA, and the medical examiner's expertise, Rebecca might have remained a Jane Doe. Instead, her killer was brought to justice. For her family, however, the verdict was bittersweet. Justice had been delivered, but Rebecca was gone. As her mother said, conviction could not bring her back. Forgiveness was impossible. What remained was the comfort of knowing that no one else would suffer at Ganthier's hands, and that Rebecca's voice, silenced by violence, had been heard at last. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.